Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Thursday, December the 24th, 2020. I say I look a little ghastly here in the display. Let's see if there's anything I can do about that. Is that any better? That's a little better, I think. Okay, so we've been having transmission problems, and I was looking at this, and I see there are bars on my Wi-Fi, and when it goes down to 1, say, then you get the buffering. So we're at 2 now. I'm just going to try an experiment here. I'm just going to disconnect and see what happens. Okay, there we are back, and I have, more bars. Okay, so Merry Christmas to Anne Run, Emmett Kelly's Earth, and Quachalango. Thank you very much. I will be broadcasting tomorrow, doing something a little different. I will begin with a reading in full of Leo Tolstoy's great story, What Men Live By. And then, with the time that's left over, I thought I would, I'll provide some lists of my favorite things, and we can talk about that. I mean, favorite things in art, literature, films, etc., 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 music. People love to debate that sort of thing, so I thought we would do that. So let's begin by talking about the apotheosis of Dr. Anthony Fauci. But first, let's go to the panic report. That is to say, the Drudge report. CDC, 420K deaths by mid-January. Tennessee now ground zero for surge. LA in crisis mode. Dallas down to 17 ICU beds. Hospital employees turn against each other to get vaccine. I don't know, couldn't they twerk their way out of the panic? More allergic reactions, healthcare worker hospitalized. Politicians and jabs, set example or cut in line. Republican Congressman-elect moved to critical care. Fauci admits intentionally moving goalposts will take 90% immunity across USA to end pandemic. Ho, ho, ho. And the main headline, dark days, mutant strains everywhere. Studies warn more deaths. Republicans block $2,000 stimulus checks. Christmas Eve showdown. Bleak holiday for jobless. And I'm going to be talking, of course, about the now sainted, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease expert, admitted in a new interview that he's been intentionally moving the goalposts on his recommendations regarding herd immunity based on what he thinks the American people want to hear. Herd immunity, or the percentage of a population that requires resistance to the coronavirus through infection or vaccination, has been widely estimated at roughly 60 to 70% for the coronavirus since the start of the pandemic. Dr. Fauci also cited that number in the beginning of the pandemic, but said it would be about 75% in an interview about a month ago. The New York Times reported last week, he reportedly told CNBC 75, 80, 85%, and 75 to 80 plus. It sounds like this fellow really is desperate for everyone to be vaccinated. Dr. Fauci told the Time interview published Thursday that he has slowly but deliberately been moving the goalposts, partly based on new science and partly based on his gut feeling that the American public was ready to receive the information, which is that 70 to 90% herd immunity should be achieved before the country can go back to normal. I will just say here that Dr. Fauci's estimates are far higher than normal in pandemics. He said he hesitated to state a number as high as 90% weeks ago because many Americans seem skeptical about vaccine. The other shoe drops. When polls said only half of Americans would take a vaccine, I was saying herd immunity would take 70 to 75%, Fauci said. Then when newer survey said that 60% or more would take it, I thought I can nudge this up a bit. So I went to 80, 85%. Oh, yes. So it's not really science. The people railing against COVIDiots, anti-maskers, have been appealing to the great god science. But Dr. Fauci seems to be more in the manufacturing consent business. We need to have some humility here, he added. We really don't know what the real number is. I think the real range is somewhere between 70 and 90%, but I'm not going to say 90%. Oh, well, that clears it up. Dr. Fauci got vaccinated. Wolf Blitzer of CNN tweeted, "He's a national treasure. Let's all wish Dr. Anthony Fauci a happy birthday today. We're also grateful to him for saving lives over all these years, and we need him now more than ever." So we missed Christmas by one day. Cosima Wagner, another person with a big ego, was born on December the 24th. But since she had something of a God complex, she changed her birthday to December the 25th, which leads us to the famous story of how her husband, Richard Wagner, wrote the Siegfried Idyll for her birthday, which wasn't her birthday, but you know how some people are. Emerald Robinson comments on Blitzer and Fauci, mediocrities with no credibility like to stick together. So I came across this remarkable tweet from someone called Austin Bundy of, let's see what's going on here. Has this fellow blocked me, or has he removed he's removed the tweet. Removed the tweet. And the tweet referred to Austin Bundy and others calling Dr. Fauci our Lord and Savior. I responded, "Your blasphemy does not amuse. God is watching you." But the internet never forgets, as they say. Kristen Taylor writes at the Gateway Pundit, "Today is the 80th birthday of Dr. Anthony Fauci, career bureaucrat at the National Institutes of Health and celebrated Beltway insider. Fauci became a hero of the anti-Trump resistance this year for signaling his disrespect for Trump at the White House briefings and in his ubiquitous media appearances. Fauci has served as the director of the NIH's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases since 1984. He's been a prominent member of President Trump's White House coronavirus task force this year, but has been sidelined by Trump since summer in favor of the now departed Dr. Scott Atlas." CNNers Wolf Blitzer and Austin Bundy posted photos with messages of idolatrous worship of Fauci on Thursday, Christmas Eve, with Bundy calling Fauci our 2020 Lord and Savior. And here's the tweet, which has been saved. And it is a T-shirt of various poses of Fauci with the White House seal. And the cut line, "All eyes," spelt with a Z, street style, "on me." And "Big Fauci," it says at the top. In the background is two portraits of the sainted Dr. Fauci. What do we know about Dr. Fauci? Well, he's around forever. And we know that Carrie Mullins, Nobel Prize winner, as the co-discoverer of the PCR test, said that Dr. Fauci doesn't know anything about anything. He called him a liar and pointed out that the PCR test was not meant to discover whether people had been infected by diseases. Last year, Dr. Fauci joked that pretty soon all diseases will be attributed to viruses, which is a discredited theory which came about in the 1970s. Tom Bethel wrote that years ago that the medical establishment spent God knows how much money by a virus. Yeah, that's not how viruses work. They hit you fast and hard and in great numbers, great viral load. But no. And it's Dr. Fauci Day. And you can see that trending on Twitter. DC's mayor has declared it Dr. Fauci Day. Was that Muriel Bowser? And Time just named him one of its guardians of the year. Happy Dr. Fauci Day. Trust science, not morons. Well, as we just heard, Fauci has admitted to playing fast and loose with the science. Olivia of Troy tweets, "Happy birthday, Dr. Fauci. Thank you for your strength and perseverance in leading our country during one of the darkest times. No matter how hard things got, you were there. In Fauci, we trust." Happy birthday, Dr. Fauci, from Marianne Gazdak. Thank you for all you've done for the people of this country. We all love you. Dr. Fauci Day. Listen to Fauci. There's a little GIF there. Dr. Fauci has been a hero to our nation during this incredibly difficult year, working tirelessly to save lives and guide our nation's response to and recovery from the pandemic. That is from the proclamation from Mayor Muriel Bowser of Washington, D.C. And there are more and more salutations and encomiums to him und so weiter. Dr. Fauci has a past. Of course, you know, he's been a Beltway sider forever, it seems, and he has a past with regards to AIDS. AIDS was the coronavirus of the 1980s. As was actually well known, empirical evidence showed at the time that AIDS was a disease of male homosexuals and intravenous drug users and those unfortunates who were infected with HIV through blood transfusions. I was sent by one of my followers on Twitter a reprint of an article by Celia Farber, which was reprinted in Spin in October 2015. And the editor of Spin, Bob Guccione Jr., introduced the piece thus: at the end of 1989, 2 years after we had started the highly controversial AIDS column in Spin, we published an article by Celia Farber called Sins of Omission about the truly bad and corrupt science surrounding promoting AZT as a treatment for the syndrome of diseases. Celia was the editor and frequent writer of the column and unearthed hard evidence of the cold-bloodedness of the AIDS establishment, pushing a drug that was worse than the disease and killed faster than the natural progression of AIDS left untreated. Yeah, AZT was indeed an abandoned cancer vaccine. And why was it abandoned? Let's see. Celia Farber writes, on a cold January day in 1987, inside one of the brightly lit meeting rooms of the monstrous FDA building, a panel of 11 top AIDS doctors pondered a very difficult decision. They'd been asked by the FDA to consider giving lightning-quick approval to a highly toxic drug about which there was very little information, clinically called zidovudine, but nicknamed AZT after its components. The drug was said to have shown a dramatic effect on the survival of AIDS patients. The study that had brought the panel together had set the medical community abuzz. It was the first flicker of hope. People were dying much faster on the placebo than on the drug. But there were tremendous concerns about the new drug. It had actually been developed a quarter of a century earlier as a cancer chemotherapy, but was shelved and forgotten because it was so toxic, very expensive to produce, and totally ineffective against cancer. Powerful but unspecific, the drug was not selective in its cell destruction. It has been described as a DNA chain terminator. That is to say that AZT prevented your body from creating new cells, which sounds a very quick way to kill someone. Farber continues, Drug companies around the world were sifting through hundreds of compounds in the race to find a cure or at least a treatment for AIDS. Burroughs Wellcome, a subsidiary of Wellcome, a British drug company, emerged as the winner. By chance, they sent the failed cancer drug, then known as Compound S, to the National Cancer Institute, along with many others, to see if it could slay the AIDS dragon HIV. In the test tube, at least, it did. At the meeting, there was a lot of uncertainty and discomfort with AZT. The doctors who had been consulted knew the study was flawed and that the long-range effects were completely unknown. But the public was almost literally the door. Understandably, there was immense pressure on the FDA to approve AZT, considering the climate of fear and anger all around. Everywhere an FDA director would represent a significant and potentially dangerous departure from our normal toxicology requirements. Just before approving the drug, one doctor on the panel, Calvin Coonan, summed up their dilemma. Quote, on the one hand, to deny a drug which decreases mortality in a population such as this would be inappropriate. On the other hand, to use this drug widely for areas where efficacy has not been demonstrated with a potentially toxic agent might be disastrous. We do not know what will happen a year from now, said panel chairman Dr. Itzhak Brook. The data is just too premature and the statistics are not really well done. The drug could be detrimental, unquote. A little later, he said he was also struck by the fact that AZT does not stop deaths. Even those who were switched to AZT still kept dying. I agree with you, answered another panel member. There are so many unknowns. Once a drug is approved, there is no telling how it could be abused. There is no going back. Burroughs Wellcome reassured the panel that they would provide detailed 2-year follow-up data and that they would not let the drug get out of its intended parameters as a stopgap measure for very sick patients. Dr. Brook was not won over by the promise, if we approve it today, there will be not much data. There will be a promise of data, but then the production of data will be hampered. Brook's vote was the only one cast against approval. Essentially, AZT was a drug which killed every single person who took it. Thankfully, there were many people who were prescribed AZT or had demanded it, and they stopped taking it, and then they stopped dying. Flash forward, August 17th, 1989, newspapers across America banner headlined that AZT had been proven to be effective in HIV antibody-positive, asymptomatic, and early ARC patients, even though one of the panel's main concerns was that the drug should only be used in a last-case scenario for critically ill AIDS patients due to the drug's extreme toxicity. Dr. Anthony Fauci, head of the National Institutes of Health, was now pushing to expand prescription. The FDA's traditional concern had been thrown to the wind. Already the drug had spread to 60 countries and an estimated 20,000 people. Not only had no new evidence allayed the initial concerns of the panel, but the follow-up data, as Dr. Brook predicted, had fallen by the wayside. The beneficial effects of the drug had proven to be temporary. The toxicity, however, stayed the same. Burroughs Wellcome stock went through the roof when the announcement was made, at a price of $8,000 per patient per year, not including blood work and transfusions. AZT is, well, at the time, the most expensive drug ever marketed. Burroughs Wellcome's gross profits for the next year are estimated at $230 million. Stock market analysts predict that Burroughs Wellcome may be selling as much as $2 billion worth of AZT under the brand name Retrovir each year by the mid-1990s, matching Burroughs Wellcome's total sales for all of its drugs last year. AZT is the only antiretroviral drug that has received FDA approval for treatment of AIDS since the epidemic began 10 years ago, and the decision to approve it was based on a single study that has long been declared invalid. The study was intended to be a double-blind, placebo-controlled study, the only kind of study that can effectively prove whether or not a drug works. In such a study, neither patient nor doctor is supposed to know if the patient is getting the drug or the placebo. In the case of AZT, the study became unblinded on all sides after just a few weeks. Here's what happened. The people in the test group, the one test group, they wanted to get AZT because they had been told that it was efficacious. Meanwhile, people in the group that was getting the drug, they sickened and sickened quickly. And it quickly became known who was getting AZT and who was getting the placebo. And so drugs were swapped, completely invalidating the study. In fact, Celia Farber, in her last article for Harper's, the last issue that Lewis Lapham edited, at that time reported there was not a single AIDS drug double-blind test that had ever been completed. Not one, for the reasons that I just mentioned. And let's see, the study was so sloppily done, it didn't really mean much, says Dr. Joseph Sonnabend, a leading New York City AIDS doctor. Dr. Harvey Bialy, a scientific editor of the journal Biotechnology, is stunned by the low quality of science surrounding AIDS research. When asked if he had seen any evidence of the claims made for AZT that it prolongs life in AIDS patients, Bialy said, "No, I have not seen a published study that is rigorously done, analyzed, and objectively reported." Bialy, who is also a molecular biologist, is horrified by the widespread use of AZT, not just because it is toxic, but because he insists the claims its widespread use are based upon are false. "I can't see how this drug could be doing anything other than making people very sick." Undeniably, AZT kills T4 cells. No one can argue with that. AZT is a chain-terminating, which means it stops DNA replication. It seeks out any cell that is engaged in DNA replication and kills it. The place where most of this replication is taking place is in the bone marrow. That's why the most common and severe side effect of the drug is bone marrow toxicity. That is why the patient of these withered, sweating bodies with the long matted hair and the sunken face that we all remember from the night of the use of AT. The toxic effects of AZT, particularly bone marrow suppression and anemia, are so severe that up to 50% of all AIDS and ARC patients cannot tolerate it and have to be taken off it. In the approval letter that Burroughs Wellcome sent to the FDA, all 50 additional side effects of AZT, aside from the most common ones, were listed. These included loss of mental acuity, muscle spasms, rectal bleeding, and tremors. Anemia, one of AZT's common side effects, is the depletion of red blood cells. Yes. And so, Fauci, let's get back to him in this story. Fauci was a cheerleader, one of the top cheerleaders for AZT. August 17, 1989, the government has announced that 1.4 million healthy HIV antibody positive Americans could benefit from taking AZT, even though they show no symptoms of disease. New studies have proven that AZT is effective in stopping the progression of AIDS in asymptomatic and early ARC cases. Dr. Fauci, the head of the NIH, proudly announced that a trial has been going on for 2 years, had clearly shown that early intervention will keep AIDS at bay. Anyone who has antibodies to HIV and less than 500 T4 cells should start taking AZT at once, he said. That is approximately 650,000 people. 1.4 million Americans are assumed HIV antibody positive, and eventually all of them may need to take AZT so they don't get sick, Fauci contended. AZT is one of the greatest scandals in American medical history. And who is at the forefront of pushing this drug that was not efficacious and, as I say, pretty much killed everyone who took it? Why, that would be the sainted Dr. Anthony Fauci, the same person who told us that AIDS was everyone's disease and was not a disease of 3 types of people, which was observed right from the very beginning of the AIDS epidemic. So now this same Dr. Anthony Fauci, supposedly our Lord and Savior, aggressively pushing vaccines which were perhaps rushed even more than AZT was. So, I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Yes, we're talking about Christmas here. And there's a curious story in the Washington Post yesterday by Jillian Brockle. It's that time of year again, no, not Christmas, the war on Christmas, and the war on the claim that the war on Christmas even exists. President Donald Trump invoked the alleged war yet again this week after signing an executive order giving federal employees the day off for Christmas Eve. This is a huge victory in the Democrats' pathetic war on Christmas, and I want you to be part of it, Trump announced in a fundraising letter. Well, Mr. President, there actually was a real war on Christmas. It was in the 1600s, and it was waged by Christians, specifically Puritans, who hated the December 25th observance of Jesus' birth so much that they made it illegal in the Massachusetts colony for decades. Yes, this story, I suppose, will be a revelation to people who know nothing about English history or early American history. What seems to have escaped the writer of this piece is that Puritans are, that we are not supposed to observe Christmas because it is contraindicated in 2020. And that sounds like a very much a Puritan belief to me. Let's see, Dr. Andrew Pastuski's advice for the holidays: Christmas should not be fun this year. That's a quote. And Dr. Andrew Pastuski, or Tefsky, I don't know how it's pronounced. He is now a big deal with regard to medical bureaucracy in the United States of America. Perhaps Christmas will be curtailed or banned in future years because, as we know, it's simply too risky, too dangerous for people to get together. I don't know, particularly if they're breathing or speaking, or even worse, singing. Let us go to the chat, see what's happening here. Oh, yes, Merry Christmas to you, Professor Paul, and to Palpcasso88, and to everyone in the chat. Emmett Kelly's Earth, will you sing my favorite things? No, I will not. Mary Crow says this is all seeming to be like deja vu all over again for like the 10th time, or like the clocks chiming 13 in 1984. Hello to Pearl's letting agency. Brandon Smith said Fauci's been the germ warfare guy in Washington for like 40 years. Anron says, will no one rid us of this tiresome bureaucrat? Jim Bowden, or Bowden, I don't know how it's pronounced. Perhaps you could let me know. Merry Christmas, KMG. It's Christmas morning here in Sydney. Just came back from a traditional Catholic Latin Mass. Beautiful singing, and guess what? No BS global homo social distancing. I'm going to be talking about the Latin Mass a little later, well, at 5:30 Pacific time, when I discuss Christian Carillon's film Joyeux Noël. Let's see. Jason Long says, it is total cringe that they're treating Fauci like a pope, then just a terrible doctor. Next time they will ask for his prayers. Disgusting. Yes, we might get to that point. Chocokin666 says there was significant pressure from gay organizations like ACT UP to push any drugs. That is true. However, on the other hand, there were voices within the homosexual community who were arguing strongly against AZT. They were arguing against drug regimes of any kind, and these alternative voices were ruthlessly suppressed. They were accused of being, guess what? Anti-science. Well, my idea of science is not rushing drugs to use, particularly when it is known that the one study that led to the approval of AZT was compromised, was useless, absolutely useless, as have Well, most or all of the studies that have followed. 2006 was when Lapham stopped editing Harper's, and as a final sort of gesture to his critics, he ran a very long piece by Celia Farber reporting on the still deplorable condition of HIV/AIDS medicine. Time flies really is the truest of cliches. Yes, indeed. Let's see. Contra says the withered appearance of advanced HIV patients is also because of the intestinal malabsorption. The fiasco around AZT aside, modern HIV regimens are highly effective, so nobody involved will ever be held accountable. That is true. That is true, but that does not. Thousands of people were needlessly put to death. Gamian says, why is he not in jail? Well, I don't know. We don't like to hold people responsible for that sort of thing. In Canada, this sounds incredible, but it's absolutely true. I mean, you could look it up, as they say, that the Canadian Red Cross, which was responsible for blood distribution in my country, they had stocks of recently purchased American blood, which was known to be clean. That is to say that it was not polluted by male homosexuals donating blood. What the Canadian Red Cross decided to do in order to save money or to be more efficient was that they expended their stocks of blood, which they knew to be polluted, with the result that a great many people in my country contracted HIV, which typically led at the time to, guess what, a prescription of AZT, which killed them dead. No one went to prison for this. No one was even tried. There were trials in France, but not in Canada. What happened was that the Canadian Blood Cross was stripped of its role in distributing blood in Canada, which was taken over by an organization called Canadian Blood Services. And meanwhile, in 2020, we have a ferocious push by organized homosexuals to drop the ban on them donating blood. Let's see. What else do we have here? Merry Christmas, chat crowd in KMG, says Eternal Fisherman. The same to you. Here's a story from the Washington Free Beacon, how the Centers for Disease Control went woke, by Aaron Sabarium. In 2015, Dana Bowen Matthew, the dean of George Washington University Law School, published a paper concerning the racial disparities in healthcare. She traced those disparities back to, wait for it, the Founding Fathers, and argued their persistence today reflects the structural violence of American society. Matthew was one of 11 people who helped draft the CDC's ethical framework for allocating COVID-19 vaccines. She is also listed as a health equity consultant to the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which voted in November to vaccinate essential workers before the elderly, partly on the grounds that the elderly skew white, only to pull back Sunday in the face of outrage from across the political spectrum. The committee openly acknowledged that its initial plan would result in more deaths than vaccinating older adults first, but the panel said the plan would reduce racial disparities. I suppose the plan would reduce racial disparities by killing more white people than black people. That's what we've been reduced to, folks. Something they deemed more important than saving lives, because essential workers, unlike adults over 65, are disproportionately black and Hispanic, the two groups that have borne the brunt of the pandemic. Essential workers are disproportionately black and Hispanic, based on what definition of essential? Two groups that have borne the brunt of the pandemic. Well, let's talk about comorbidities. Particularly things like obesity, morbid obesity, diabetes, heart disease. These diseases are formed, one might call, lifestyle choices, come out of thin air. Rather, it reflects the reductive racialization a worldview with concrete policy implications and concrete human cost, prioritized by race. But it was also seeded by the CDC itself, which in September hosted a series of trainings on racism, sexism, and other system inequality in direct violation of President Trump's executive order barring such programs from government agencies. And it was even seeded by the chairman of the CDC committee, Jose Romero, who said in July that minorities need to be moved to the forefront of the vaccination line. The result was an explicitly race-conscious plan that would have prioritized shrinking the case gap between races over saving the most lives. Yes, these are our medical heroes. These are the people that we all must acclaim. And what is happening in Britain at lockdown skeptics. Horse deal that Boris Johnson finally got. I haven't seen much about the deep insisting that their woke agenda must remain part of British law. And whether it has, Nigel Farage says that it was a surrender. I cannot comment on that. As Anthony Data is the London ZOE comes to come. The same thing has been observed in Stockholm. And that thing, it is Christmas Eve. We'll move on from there to Alex Berenson, who is in this panic. And he has managed, I suppose, to actually get something of a hearing jab in. How odd is that? Berenson writes, bulletin from either way, happy 2020. Ho, 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 busiest travel day since March. Only the poor suckers watching CNN still fear the row. Cuomo. Fool me 1,000 times and I'm going home for Christmas. And Berenson says Massachusetts just put out its first weekly COVID vaccine report. Super comprehensive. How many doses? 2% of the vaccine immunizations. All the data you could want, except for one tiny detail, which is not really a virus. They mess with the genetic structure of your body. So it is increasingly clear, Berenson writes, from the European all-cause mortality data, which comes in faster than in COVID deaths. This looks especially true in the UK, which, no surprise, has massive testing to US deaths with only a small rise in all-case mortality, about 1/5 its spring peak. Bethany McLean had tweeted, I'm glad it's now conventional wisdom that the US has screwed our kids big time. But when I remember the personal abuse heaped upon those of us who called this last spring, when it was still fixable, I get a little angry, Berenson comments. Only a little. One serious reaction in Alabama and in New York, it appears most states are now only reporting anaphylactic shock. Apparently, the number of people who say that they are not interested in taking the vaccine has apparently hit 50% again. So perhaps Dr. Fauci will have to tell us that herd immunity requires, 110%. Yeah, something like that will be coming. I recall hearing circa, 1986 or 1987, that the World Health Organization had said that by the year 2000, 105% of people on Earth would have HIV. How they came up with a figure of more than 100 is a mystery to me. But no, AIDS was everyone's disease. And if you do not believe that AIDS was everyone's disease, you were not only anti-science, you were homophobic. Let's move on to American politics. This is from Jim Hofta, Gateway Pundit. No Christmas present for you. GOP lawmakers defy President Trump as $2,000 checks for all Americans fails thanks to Pelosi's tricks. Well, we saw from the Drudge Report that, apparently this is the Republicans' fault. Hofta writes, they really hate you. They really, really hate you. On Tuesday, President Trump gave an address from the White House on the COVID relief bill in which he called on Congress to redo the $900 billion, 5,593 pages long bill passed Monday night after months of negotiation by providing payments to Americans of $2,000 per adult or $4,000 per couple. The bill passed by the House and Senate contained payments of only $600 per adult American, but giving up to $1,800 for the families of illegal aliens married to American citizens. Of course. The address was posted to Twitter. Trump read off a list of millions and billions of dollars in the bill designed for foreign nations and special interests, comparing that to the $600 for Americans. Trump also called on more relief for small businesses, especially restaurants. And for all those pedants who are going to say, it's not one bill, there are two bills. Yes, I understand that there are two bills, but they were promoted and passed in tandem. On Thursday morning, the U.S. House voted to give $1,000 to every American in the new bill, and, well, this was voted down. It was a slick trick by Nancy Pelosi to make sure it failed. All she needed was one objection in a voice vote to ensure it failed. She got it. She could have called in the entire House to vote, but she didn't, because she only knows how to play politics and punish American. I Am Roger B. tweeted, Pelosi knew using unanimous consent meant a single objection from anyone in the House would mean the new bill for 2,000 checks would not pass before Christmas. She knew. I am so effing disgusted. She could have summoned the House back and used the roll call vote to make it pass. And of course, House Republicans defied President Trump. Phil Lewis tweeted, House Republicans defied Trump and blocked a vote on $2,000 stimulus checks, making the future of the entire COVID-19 relief package uncertain. That, yes, it's absolutely essential that Pakistan gets millions of dollars for gender stuff. Apparently, Pakistani women can't drive cars or open bank accounts without their husband's permission, and American taxpayers must deal with that. More to the point about. So, in the Christmas spirit, Donald Trump announced more pardons yesterday. And this is from whitehouse.gov. People pardoned James Kassouf, Mary McCarty, Christopher Wade, Christopher II X, formerly Christopher Anthony Bryant, Cesar Lozada, Joseph Martin Stevens, Anthony Barron Warden, Robert Coughlin, John Boltby, and Peter Atkinson. This is interesting to me. Trump granted a full pardon to John Boltby and Peter Atkinson. Boltby is the former chief financial officer, and Atkinson is the former vice president of Hollinger International. Both men were convicted as part of an alleged fraud scheme involving Lord Conrad Black, and both served nearly a year in prison for mail fraud. Trump previously pardoned Lord Black, and for similar reasons, and with the support of Lord Black, former Assistant U.S. Attorney Ronald Safer and David Nathanson. He has now granted a full pardon to Boltby and Atkinson. Joseph Ochipinti, Rebecca Charleston, Ricky Cantor, Topeka Sam. Now that is a name. Sam's life is a story of redemption. She became a powerful advocate for criminal justice reform. Since she completed 3 years of a 130-month sentence, she received in 2012 as a result of pleading guilty to one count of conspiracy to possess and distribute cocaine. Sam has since dedicated her life to helping other women in need turn from a path of despair towards a path of redemption. She founded Ladies of Hope Ministries, which helps formerly incarcerated women transition back into society. Others pardoned James Batmazian, William Clements Jr., Russell Pleasance, Danielle Gozes Wagner, Mark Siljander, Stephanie Moore, Gary Brugman, John Tate, and Jesse Benton. Charles Kushner, who of course is Jared Kushner's father. And since completing a sentence in 26, Charles Kushner has been devoted to important philanthropic organizations and causes. Margaret Hunter, Paul Manafort, who of course was one of Trump's lawyers, he was convicted of let's see, stemming from convictions prosecuted in the course of special counsel Mueller's investigation, which was premised on the Russian collusion hoax. Manafort has already spent 2 years in prison, including a stretch of time in solitary confinement. Treatment worse than that what many violent criminals receive as a result of blatant prosecutorial overreach. Manafort has endured years of unfair treatment and is one of the most prominent victims of what has been revealed to be perhaps the greatest witch hunt in American history. Roger Stone got a pardon. His sentence had been previously commuted in July. He's a 68-year-old man with numerous medical conditions and a giant tattoo of Richard Nixon on his chest. His chest or back, I forget which. Due to prosecutorial misconduct, special counsel Mueller's team, Stone was treated very unfairly. He was subjected to a pre-dawn raid of his home, which immediately, conveniently captured on camera. And Mark Shapiro and Irving Stitsky. And it's traditional, for presidents to hand out pardons. But one Republican senator is furious about this. And that would be the exceedingly untrustworthy looking Ben Sasse, Republican of Nebraska. According to Axios, he issued a terse statement criticizing Trump for issuing full pardons to 26 more people on Wednesday, saying, "This is rotten to the core." Of note, his office set up Sasse's one-line comment by stating that Trump had pardoned another tranche of felons, specifically naming former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and the president's lifelong associate Roger Stone, both of whom the statement said flagrantly and repeatedly violated the law and harmed Americans. The senator publicly criticized the president over the summer on issues including QAnon supporters, the administration's foreign policy, not enough wars, not enough bombing of hapless foreigners, national security, and for mishandling the pandemic. Yes, I do not like this Sasse fellow. What do we have from Vox International Airport? And Congressman Adam Schiff was just being escorted back out of a terminal with about 15 LAPD/airport police. Well, let's see. Oh, I'd say it's looking increasingly. Oh, the coming river interview of Patrick Byrne. It was pretty much a bombshell interview. It's a 2-hour interview, but I've summarized all the salient points here. It is Patrick Byrne, again, who I feel is likely a spook reading lines from a script. Elected president of the United States on November 3rd. He now occupies the office of president-elect. He was elected fair and square. He's guilty of disseminating misinformation, just to make that clear. Nonetheless, Byrne says that they have full electronic tracking of a proven fraud, as they have 100% evidence showing a Dominion machine in a voting center had a wireless access card installed, which was connecting to a smart thermostat in the building to jump on the internet, where it was connecting to a computer located in a building in a city in China, where state officials for that swing state had major connections back. Second, he says that the up-level staff under Trump are trying to thwart him. He also said they have cut off President Trump from a special prosecutor and given a TSCI clearance, and for his staff to give her whatever she needs. And now the staff won't even let him know. He has never seen anything like it. It is very reminiscent of Reagan ordering an attack on Iran twice, only to see nothing blows it away. And another, which he called the MOAB of all stories, from which there is. Says, speaking of swampy and disloyal White House staffers, the New York Times reports potentially informative communications anomaly. On Tuesday, White House officials sent an email to staff members about departure procedures before a new administration begins January 20th. On Wednesday, a new email, quote, "Please disregard the below message. Updated information will be shared in the coming days," unquote. And, of course, he vetoed the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2020. Trump, that is, he called it a gift to China and Russia. So let's see what President Trump has been tweeting late. This is a really remarkable thing in political history because instead of often indecipherable hacks, we have been getting the unvarnished Donald Trump since he became president. 1 hour ago, I saved at least 8 Republican senators, including Mitch, from losing in the last rigged for president election. Now they almost all sit back and watch me fight against a crooked and vicious foe, the radical left Democrats. I will never forget. And of course, this claim about election fraud is disputed. Twitter has made an amendment. Trump again, Twitter is going wild with their flags, trying hard to suppress even the truth, just shows how dangerous they are, purposely stifling free speech, very dangerous for our country. Does Congress know that this fraud is not a conspiracy theory? It is a fact. And once again, I must point out that as YouTube has decreed, this is, Maria Bartiromo. I meant to bring this up earlier, but there is a war on her because she is sticking by Trump. And oh dear, what's happened to Maria Bartiromo? Oh, we used to think the world of her, but now she's gone crazy. Tim Young tweeted, "Gotta love how leftist media put out a hit piece on Maria Bartiromo for sharing her opinion and reporting news on how she sees it on her own show. Keep doing what you do." Trump commented, "Maria's show and ratings are better than ever. They are trying to shame her into not telling the truth. Her audience would be gone, and she is far too smart for that rigged election." Again, not a rigged election. At a meeting in Florida today, Trump tweeted, "Everyone was asking why aren't the Republicans up in arms and fighting over the fact that the Democrats stole the rigged presidential election, especially in the Senate, they said, where you helped 8 senators win their races. How quickly they forget." And again, this claim about election fraud is disputed. And 4 hours ago, more than 1 million Americans have already received the China virus vaccine, a record pace. Yes, I've had my doubts about this from the very beginning. And what happened with AZT is one of the reasons why. If Trump remains in the White House after January 20th, of course, he had better hope and pray that the vaccine is both efficacious and safe, because, of course, we do not yet know whether those 2 conditions have been met. Yes. So what do our betters, what does the elite have in store for us in the event of a Biden administration? This is from Representative Ben Babin at the Daily Signal. Blueprint for positive change exposes the left's plans for conservatives. Until the electoral votes are certified by Congress January 6th, our country will not officially select the next president. Nevertheless, liberal voices across America have already claimed victory in the presidential race and have begun laying the framework for a Biden administration. It should come as no surprise that these plans are broad in scope and radical in intent. Look no further than the Human Rights Campaign's Blueprint for Positive Change, a list of recommendations to a Biden administration to see the left expose its own desire to force conservatives across the country to conform to its vision for the nation. Some of the most shocking and disturbing demands found in this blueprint concern our schools and academia, long seen as the most promising pathway for the left to push its agenda and indoctrinate American youth as disciples of progressivism. One of its 85 egregious requests, woefully underreported in the media thus far, is to strip accreditation from religious colleges and universities that do not meet, quote, non-discrimination policies and science-based curricula standards, unquote. Here, couched in language designed to suggest moral superiority and scientific legitimacy, is a blatant, full-frontal assault on our religious liberties. The Human Rights Campaign is not simply suggesting that Christian institutions comply with the left's view of non-discrimination, but rather it is forcing institutions to either abandon the tenets of their religious belief or face severe consequences. Haven't we seen this play out in history before, such as the Soviet Revolution and Mao's Cultural Revolution? As we've already seen from his statements on the campaign trail as inconsistent ideologies as a career politician, Vice President Joe Biden is more than willing to cave under pressure from the most radical wings of his party, especially when it comes to the alphabet people community. If the Human Rights Campaign is successful, Christian schools will cease to exist, and religious institutions will be bullied to bow down to the alphabet people orthodoxy. Now, of course, I'm reminded that in my country, a similar thing happened in Britain, that when homosexuality was decriminalized in the late 1960s, we were told that it's time to these poor people just, they want to stop the harassment. They want to be able to go to their bars and such like, without the police bursting in. They want to love each other, without interference from the state. But what about the possibility that homosexuality will come to be seen as equal to heterosexual? No, that's preposterous. That's conspiracy talk. That's moon man talk. None of this will happen. Will this be taught in schools? No. Why don't you remove your tinfoil hat? This is preposterous. Something like this could never happen. Well, of course, it has happened. And as we now know, homosexuality is superior in every way to heterosexuality. This is from Steve Watson at Summit News. CNN's Chris Fredo Cuomo and guest Anthony Scaramucci suggested Wednesday that the U.S. Constitution should be amended to ensure Donald Trump or anyone else like him can never become president and wield the power of the executive again. Assuming that Biden will be sworn in as the next president, Cuomo chatted his way through an interview with former Trump insider turned hater Scaramucci. We're going to need something to check his power, check a president like him. God forbid we get another disaster like this, Scaramucci declared. Sometimes you need people like you and me to get in there and tell the truth and rough people up like this. Cuomo also suggested that Joe Biden should point at Trump and publicly shame him throughout the inauguration in January. If he goes to the inauguration, Biden should point at him and speak to the Republicans and say, you deserved better than this. He has left your party in shambles, he continued. I know the GOP. I know Republicans. I know what they're about at their best. And I will be there for you, restoring those virtues. I would point at his ass the whole time. Yes, Chris Cuomo loves Republicans because they love to lose. They were born to lose, and they expect to be applauded for this. They also expect to be paid off by K Street. But the worst thing about Trump, it would seem, is that, as he famously said in the darkest days of the 2016 campaign, I will teach you how to win. He has, but the Republican mainstays are not. They're not interested in winning. Here's a piece by Andrea Whitberg at American Thinker. For the most part, Americans assume that the vice president lacks power. The president may assign him responsibilities, but the Constitution does not. Instead, he's the understudy just in case something happens to the president, except that in the strange year of 2020, we may learn that the vice president is the most powerful man in America. Ivan Raiklin, a constitutional lawyer, claims that the Constitution grants Mike Pence the power to overturn a manifestly fraudulent election. On December 22nd, Raiklin sent out a tweet urging Pence to inform the secretaries of state in those 6 contested states that despite overwhelming evidence of fraud, again, no fraud, YouTube has decreed, certified electors that he cannot accept those certifications because the electors were not legally appointed. Again, not my opinion. This is the opinion of Raiklin and Andrea Whitberg. The tweet has attached a memorandum for President Trump that purports to come from the White House itself, or it's written on what appears to be official White House letterhead. Here's my attempt to summarize in plain English the core claims in the memorandum. Under Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution, each state, as its legislature may direct, will appoint its electors. Because the 6 disputed states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, ran entirely fraudulent elections, and because their legislatures did not dictate fraudulent elections, there is nothing to December 14th could not and did not validly certify their electors. The problem is one of fraud in the inception. When fraud permeates an election, the state lacks the power to appoint electors because no law authorized the state to act in the absence of honest election. Notably, more than 50 courts have refused to examine the mountains of evidence attesting to illegality. The cases were decided only on procedural grounds. Thus, no authority within these states has ever properly ruled on election fraud. There is one person who can examine that evidence and act accordingly. First, of course, the vice president, who is also president of the Senate, has available to him all the evidence the public has seen. However, he also has unique information available to him that state representatives, Supreme Court justices, and other senators haven't seen. He gets classified information, which includes evidence about foreign intervention in the election under President Trump's 2018 Executive Order 1384A. We're still waiting on Director of National Intelligence Ratcliffe's final report, although he has confirmed that Iran and China interfered in the election. Additionally, Pence has access to federal information about other criminal investigations, including investigations at the DOJ, election district offices, FBI field offices, U.S. attorney's offices, the U.S. Post Office's postmaster, and the U.S. Post Office's inspector general. The combination of a special knowledge and a special authority means that Pence has the sole right to demand proper certification from the states and the sole plenary power to determine whether the elector appointments he receives are legitimate. A few observations. I'm not a constitutional scholar, so I don't know if this idea is valid. 2, Trump's retweeting does not make it valid. He may just have been charmed by the idea. 3, Trump's retweeting it does suggest, however, that Trump still believes he has some tricks up his sleeve regarding the election. 4, Raiklin's tweet, which went out on Tuesday, asked Pence to send out his letters on Wednesday, something that did not happen. This video indicates that Wednesday may or may not have been a drop-dead deadline. 5, the idea puts enormous pressure on Pence. He has proven to be a rock of stability and competence. He's also a man of deep faith and patriotism, both of which contribute to courage, and courage is what Pence would need to act on this legal advice. I don't know. We have heard stories of this type going back, to 2007, that Jeff Sessions was going to drain the swamp. William Barr was the man who would do what Jeff Sessions would not. And of course, that didn't happen, did it? And we may have been set up for a fall, but as I predicted some weeks ago, Trump is not going to concede. He's simply not going to concede, and he's made it clear to this very day that he intends to fight. This is from the pundit. Many experts believe that Pence has a duty to throw out electoral college recommendations in the 2020 election that are based on fraud. And, Trump seems to be pushing Pence. And we will see what comes of that. There's a new legal memo brings hope to Trump supporters this Christmas from William J. Olson of the Western Journal. In refusing to hear Texas v. Pennsylvania, the U.S. Supreme Court abdicated its constitutional duty to resolve a real and substantial controversy among states that was properly brought as an original action in the court. As a result, the court has come under intense criticism for having evaded the most important interstate constitutional case brought to it in many decades, if not ever. However, even in its order dismissing the case, the Supreme Court identified how another challenge could be brought successfully by a different plaintiff. Again, we were given a deadline of December 24th, and now we're facing another deadline of January 6th, and there is talk of 2 million Trump supporter MAGAites being present in the nation's capital on January 6th, and we hear talk of a color revolution. Olson writes, in rejecting the invocation by the state of Texas of the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court to resolve the dispute between Texas and 4 other states that refused to abide by the terms of the Presidential Electors Clause, for now, a majority of the justices foreclosed the use of that constitutional safeguard by Texas to provide a peaceful means of resolving the controversy that has deeply divided states and the citizens of this republic, as at no time since the 1860s that consequence is too dangerous to be allowed to stand. If the same case previously brought by Texas were now brought by the United States of America, there's every reason to believe that the Supreme Court would be compelled to understand it must hear and decide it favorably. Although outcomes are never certain, it is believed and hoped that a majority of the Supreme Court could never take the position that the United States has no business enforcing the process established in the Constitution by which we select the one government official who represents all the people, the President of the United States. I mean, Americans are looking at a situation where certain states could simply decide that the results of elections are preordained. And what are you going to do about it? Well, apparently the Supreme Court has said there's nothing that can be done. But we know for a fact that the state of Pennsylvania deliberately violated state law in its acceptance of ballots. They deliberately violated state law. It would have required a constitutional amendment in Pennsylvania to let Pennsylvania do what it did. But the electoral officials in Pennsylvania did what they wanted to do. And apparently the legal position is none of our business. We don't have any standing. And that clearly is an unsupportable position. I mean, it can't stand because in future, again, any state government could determine, well, why do we even need to have a vote? Because we know who the victors are going to be from the beginning. And ballots of some sort or another, or binary digits on a computer, will be arranged in such a way so that the predetermined result is the official result. One would think that even people who do not support Trump would be displeased by this, or perhaps fearful by this, because of course, the table could turn there. The Republicans could use that as well. But no, it's all a question of whom. And since Biden occupies the office of president-elect, it all worked out for the best. See what J5 Killer has to say. He retweeted something from Scott Fishman. Joe Biden will fail at his coup, and his supporters will cry about it for another 4 years. Let's go to the chat here. Koga Pan says, Merry Christmas. Thank you, KMG. Well, Merry Christmas to you, too. Palcasso 88 says, Kevin, what do you think of the idea that the U.S. invaded Iraq because Saddam wanted to sell his oil in euros instead of American dollars? I don't know. That might have something to do with it. As Trump has pointed out, why didn't America get this oil? We heard about, blood for oil, but there was no, the United States didn't get it. It didn't get the oil. I remember hearing during the Vietnam War that the war was fought for economic reasons. I don't know, Vietnam had oil, offshore oil or whatever, and the argument was ridiculous on its face because no amount of oil found in Vietnam or off Vietnam could possibly make up for in lives and material that America expended in Vietnam. Quechalango says, let's see if these schools stand up for themselves. I don't know. Depends on what you mean by the schools. We've already heard from the teachers, or the majority of the teachers. These awful children and their parents want to infect us. So we should be paid for, I don't know what, a couple of hours of Zoom classes a day. And we already know that the children aren't learning anything from Zoom classes. Gamian says, Maria Bartiromo's voice sounds like an artillery battery. She's cool, though. Quechalango says, is there anything at all that is not disputed? Well, in my own lifetime, or at least when I became old enough to be conscious of presidential elections, 2000, well, specifically the state of Florida was disputed. And there was a rather minor dispute in 2004 over Ohio. But apart from that, no, the elections were not disputed. There have been disputed, this fellow in the state of Washington, the Republican, had his governorship stolen from him by the legislature, and we saw a stolen Senate seat in Minnesota. But for the most part, overwhelmingly so, American elections have been seen as fair. Hickman Warrior says, Ameriquois seems obsessed with Iran. Yeah, I suppose so. I thought they were the less, I thought they were the, how would I say, more modest Muslims. KMG looks bald. Is it just me? I suppose it's a trick of the light. Well, there's my hair. It's thin, but it still exists. I did trim my hair somewhat today. It was getting a bit shaggy. Dionysius says, I hope to get a $2,000 stimulus check so I can pay my dues to KMG. Very, very kind of you. Very kind of you. I see that our valiant moderator, Chad Chadson, is in the chat. Merry Christmas to you, Chad. What does Glib Medley have to say? Oh, he's apologizing for something. I'll have to scroll up to see. I did, in fact, pinch the bottom of a 60-something woman at a drink-infused corporate event last year. She takes regular ballet classes, and we've hugged a lot before. Oh, okay. All right. Hickman Warrior again. Nurse giving Biden vaccine jerky technique. Zoom Briss. Okay. Oh, dear. That's like something out of Videodrome. Okay, Contra-coup. The Democrats' desire for what could be termed coercive medicine will go directly at odds with their support for malpractice attorneys. How will they allow lawsuits resulting from forced vaccines? That is a problem. Chokin 666, read Dr. Peter Duesberg on the HIV fiasco. I have read him at great length. I read his book. I still have a copy of it. I can't remember the co-author. I've mentioned Zemmelweis on just a sec here. And we're back now. Zemmelweis got doctors in Vienna to wash their hands and nurses to their mothers from puerperal fever plummeted. But Semmelweis faced two problems. One, he didn't have a theory to explain why this worked, and two, he was Jewish. So he was forced out, and the doctors and nurses stopped washing their hands, and the deaths zoomed up again. Until the synthesis of vitamins, what the medical profession said about deficiency diseases was entirely wrong. They've become besotted with the microbe theory of disease. And so you look at scurvy and rickets and such like, and they were wrong about this for the longest time. In fact, going back to Captain Cook, Cook figured out that fresh fruit would prevent scurvy, and as early as 1800, Napoleon's army discovered that fresh meat would prevent scurvy. Amundsen knew this, and he prevented his explorers from getting this dreadful disease. But again, there was no theory to justify this, so it was dismissed by the medical profession. There are many, many other such examples. Let's talk about Megan Mertz. We were all waiting, some of us desperately, for Megan Mertz Christmas. It's from the Mail. Archie's very plush playhouse, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle splashed out on a $7,000 bespoke, that means handmade, mini English country cottage, complete with split stable doors and a thatched roof. Prince Harry and Meghan released a Christmas card showing the family in their garden in California. Couple are seen playing with a 19-month-old son in front of a custom playhouse in style of English cottage, which bears a striking similarity to the lavish Wendy house in the grounds of Windsor Castle the Queen enjoyed. Jessica Green writes, they didn't give their son a royal title, but Prince Harry and Meghan Mertz have still made sure 19-month-old Archie, yes, that is his actual name. It's not a nickname. It's not short or diminutive. It's not short for Archibald. No, it is Archie, full stop. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex showed off a lavish playhouse built for their son in the garden of their home in Montecito, California, in an illustration shared yesterday on the front of their new Christmas card. The cottage features a thatched roof and split stable doors. The playhouse has a rustic British cottage feel and has English countryside vibes that wouldn't look out of place in the grounds of one of the British royal residences, according to Jamie Stanford, managing director at UK-based toy company Liberty Games. Indeed, the playhouse looks strikingly similar to the Wendy house Prince Harry's grandmother, the Queen, was gifted on her 60th birthday by the people of Wales. That remains in the grounds of Windsor's Royal Lodge. And I'm looking at a picture of the Sussex's Christmas card, which is, well, it's crummy, okay? Supposedly, the photograph was taken by Meghan Mertz's mother, Doria, the noted photographer. And then some sort of effect, some sort of after effect was applied to it to make it somewhat resemble a painting. Now, when I saw a picture of 19-month-old Archie sitting, he's sitting on the lap of his father, it struck me immediately, this is not a 19-month-old boy. This boy rather looks as if he is, say, 4 years old. And more on that shortly. Oh, let's see. Meghan Harry's Christmas card created by a skilled illustrator. While no creator has been credited, a graphic designer has told Female that the image must have been made by a skilled illustrator. Anna DeSaro said, having had a good look at the card and being an illustrator myself, I could say that it looks like it has been done manually from a skilled illustrator or an artist. Taking a closer look at the image, you can notice Photoshop brushes or an iPad Pro and pen, and you wouldn't notice a difference. Well, if it's done by Adobe Photoshop, how is that a skilled illustrator? I'm a little lost there. But let's have more on little Archie. This is from a site which I have cited many times, which is called harrymarkle.wordpress.com. And the entry is entitled, The Insincere and Faux Sussex Christmas Card 2020. This year it was the turn of the Mayhew charity that was chosen to release the Sussex Christmas card. And I say chosen because no UK company posts things at nighttime on their social media unless it's breaking news. There's no doubt in my mind that MM requested them to post it at a specific time, and that was around 9:30 p.m., which is the afternoon in California. We are thrilled to receive wonderful Christmas wishes from our patron, the Duchess of Sussex, who also made a personal donation, helping dogs, cats, and our community. From all of us at Mayhew, thank you and Merry Christmas. And there is the picture again. Last year, a card was shared late at night again, around 10:30 p.m., and it was a photoshopped and blurry issue that Press Association Media killed less than 24 hours later. The offering this year was a tacky, crass, and fake cartoon-like image that looked as if it had been generated by an old graphic art app. Allegedly, it had been based on an original photo that Doria had taken. What more can you say about it other than it looks fake, probably because it is fake, and make-believe like a cartoon? The setting was far too staged, and the toddler known as Archie looks as if he is 4 or 5 years old. My, is there a time continuum vortex in Montecito that we don't know about? The setting was either a doghouse or a faux playhouse, but it all looked out of perspective as Harry could fit in it. Some people mock the image, saying that must be Harry's house, and the dog seemed too perfectly placed, and we know animals, even in images of the great masters, do not pose for images. Some say the child looked like George, that is the child of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. And indeed, it does look like Prince George. But perhaps that's wishful thinking on the Sussexes' part, to have in their hands an heir to the throne. But let's talk about Archie. Questions will arise over the existence and authenticity of the toddler known as Archie, because no doctors have attested to the birth. The toddler has no title. Claims that the duo didn't want one are dismissed because formally they exist at birth, and the individual then chooses not to use it publicly. The size and image of the toddler seem to have varied in public photos. The toddler was able to speak in sentences at a year old, and now in the graphic art image, he looks as if he is at primary school already. This was bizarre circumstances. We had Megan Mertz cradling her stomach, and all these women are imitating her now. Oh, you're pregnant. I never would have guessed. But it was a signifier. Look, I'm pregnant. I'm really pregnant. And then the child did not appear when it was supposed to have appeared. Royal physicians did not attend at the birth. It was all kept secret and hush-hush. That is to say, we don't know officially when the child was born, whether it in fact is the natural child of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And it has been claimed repeatedly that Megan Mertz was not, in fact, pregnant, and a child was secured from some agency. And perhaps if this illustration on the Christmas card is correct, a different child has been procured, a much older child. You will notice this in television sitcoms. You don't see very young children on sitcoms because, of course, it's impossible for them to act, and they're just a pain on set. So typically you'll see a baby, and then in the next season of the show, the child will already be 6 years old or something like that. And 6-year-old children are far more tractable than 1 or 2 or 3-year-old children. Why is this significant, what I've been talking about? Well, because of incidents, famous incidents in the past, particularly that regarding the issue of James II, the last legitimate king of England. This is from a site called History Naked. Practically everyone in England hated James II. He was wildly unpopular. He had fathered 2 grown daughters before he became king, and they were duly raised as good Protestants. Then he had the temerity to convert to Catholicism. Everyone suspected it, but when he married Italian Princess Mary of Modena, it was pretty much confirmed. Solid Protestant England was beside itself. They were convinced James was trying to overthrow the Church of England and bring England back into the Roman fold. The only saving grace was James's 2 daughters by his marriage to Anne Hyde, and who were Protestant. His eldest daughter, Mary, was married to William of Orange, another good Protestant. At their wedding, her uncle Charles II practically oversaw the consummation of the marriage, instructing his young nephew-in-law, now nephew, to your work, hey, St. George for England. The 2 young people were said to not like each other very much, and Mary cried for 2 days when told she was marrying William, be that as it may. The English people only had to wait out James until he died. Then they could get back to business without worrying about converting back to Rome. Then James's new wife, Mary of Modena, got pregnant. This was after a trip to the spas at Bath, and rumors went round that it was a supposititious baby and that James was not the father. They'd been married for over 10 years and nothing, and now she turns up pregnant. The public tried to console themselves. However, Mary defied the odds and gave birth to a living, healthy boy. The happy couple named him James Francis Edward Stuart. At any other time, the birth of a healthy prince would have been cause for celebration, but this time it was a calamity. The boy's Italian mother and Catholic father would ensure the prince was brought up in the Catholic Church. England was as good as back in the Roman fold if something was not done, and done quickly. And out of necessity, an elaborate theory was born. Rumors ran wild that Mary of Modena had not given birth to a healthy boy, but to a stillborn child. Then who was the new prince in the nursery? An impostor, smuggled in from a common mother in a warming pan. If you've seen a 17th century warming pan, it is impossible to see how a baby could possibly fit, let alone be smuggled in. Trying to cram a crying newborn into a cold metal pan doesn't sound like a quiet affair. Someone would have noticed. James II was outraged and eventually produced up to 40 witnesses to his son's birth. However, the rumors persisted. Mary and William were particularly fond of the story and were said to encourage its spread. Elaborate maps were drawn showing how the baby was smuggled into the palace. It was decided that the Home Secretary would attend particularly close to the throne, but he is in the line. And the reason why royal births are attended upon by royal physicians is to prevent the scandal that occurred upon as the old pretender of James II. The old pretender, he gave birth to a child named Charles, who, of course, we knew later as Bonnie Prince Charlie, who took part in invasion of Scotland. There are many myths about this. Bonnie Prince Charlie was a gross and dissolute man when in Scotland or England. He did not succeed in his rebellion, probably because he was too cautious. The country was in a panic. He probably could have pressed on to London, but it was not to be. Now, Bonnie Prince Charlie's brother, he had a brother named Henry, who later became a cardinal archbishop. And upon the death of his brother Charles, he had coins minted, which read in Latin, Henry IX, King of Great Britain and Ireland, not by the will of men, but by the grace of God. I quite like that story, which actually happens to be true. So a final look at the chat before I move on to Theater Thursday. Picasso 88, Harry should not go on the Maury Povich show. You are not the father. Metatron says, Duke and Duchess of Sussex, deport them preferably to Venezuela and run. Maybe Archie's mother was a jackal. Pearl's Letting Agency says they aspire to become posh and Bex, the gold standard of nouveau riche. I see more dignity from Posh and Bex than I do from Harry and Meghan. What else do we have here? Dionysius says masks make hardly no difference in terms of virus. Even in operation rooms, there is no proof that it protects the PA. Yes, Berenson went into some detail, a couple of months ago, that in our own province, or my own province, Canadian province of Ontario, just a few years ago, nurses during a flu epidemic, nurses in hospitals were ordered to wear masks at all times, and their union sued. And this went to an arbitration, and the arbitrator held, after hearing evidence from both sides, that there was no evidence that masks would prevent the nurses from getting infected or from them from infecting patients. Obviously, you were not going to have people with influenza symptoms, hacking, sneezing, and whatever, working as nurses. But there you go. This has been adjudicated previously, but I don't know. That doesn't seem to matter, does it? So the movie today is called Joyeux Noël, which means Merry Christmas. And it is written and directed by Christian Carillon. And it was nominated in 2006 for Academy Award for Best Foreign Film. And it is about the famous Christmas truce of 1914. This is a multinational story, and Joyeux Noël is a multinational film. It was filmed in Scotland, and in France and Germany and Romania, actually. And it is a true story, but a woman has been insinuated into this story because, of course, at that time, soldiers were all men. And so it is true that a singer was given leave by the Kaiser's son to sing to troops. At that time, his wife, as in the movie, was not present. One could consider this to be irritating, but there's a large section of audiences that will, women in particular, that do not like films that have no women in them. And of course, the singer, she is a Danish woman called Sorensen, is played by the radiant Diane Kruger, which goes a long way with me. I'll note that Diane Kruger and Benno Furman, who plays Private Nicholas Sprink, they do not sing their own parts, but they went all out for the singers who dubbed their parts. The tenor is sung by the great Rolando Villazon, and the soprano is sung by the great French singer Nathalie Dessay. So we learn a little bit about the characters before we get into the dirty, into the trenches. In fact, the movie begins with helicopter shots of the landscape, a landscape as yet unscarred by war. The photography is by Walter van den Ende, and it is most impressive, I must say. I'll also say that the music, there is a lot of diegetic music in this, from bagpipes, human voice, chamber orchestra, etc. There is a score by Philippe Rombi, and I have to congratulate it for not being overwhelming, or the whoosh effect, as Wim Wenders has complained of. I thought that there were several times in the movie where I thought, here are the bagpipes playing, and we're going to get that orchestra really selling it, but that did not happen. That is the temptation, that single voice accompanied by bagpipes or harmonica or whatever. We need a 120-piece orchestra to really slam home the pathos. But the director very wisely, and to his credit, avoided this dreadful cliche. The movie actually begins after the landscapes with school children from the various countries involved in this war, explaining that the other side must be exterminated because they're evil people, and it must be done now in order to save us from having to do it in the future. And we go to Scotland, where we see a priest who is very well played by Gary Lewis. Despite his Welsh name, he is a Scottish actor, and he has a very Scottish-looking face, which is very useful for such a part. He is a priest, and we see him in his church, and we see a young man called William, a blonde man named William, and he works in the church, and we see him restoring statues. There is a symbolic bit where the priest is engaged in lighting candles, and William's brother Jonathan bursts into the church and rings the bell and explains that war has begun and finally something important is happening in our lives. And the priest stops lighting the candles, which is very likely a reference to what Lord Grey's famous pronouncement that with the declaration of war, the lamps have gone out all over Europe. We see our tenor and his wife. They are on stage in a production, very modernist staging, I must say. I seem too modern for 1914 to me, but never mind. When a government official shows up to announce that Germany is at war and the tenor is conscripted. So all of these people are swept into the war, many with great enthusiasm. We see the Germans with their legend, Gott mit uns, God with us. You know, it's reminiscent of Bob Dylan's song, With God on Our Side. All of these countries believed that God was on their side. This film, Joyeux Noël, takes a rather different view of this, because there is something highly disturbing, even obscene, with Christians killing each other and claiming that God is on our side. This film it's really resolutely a Catholic film. Now, obviously, there were a lot of Catholics that fought in World War I, but there were a lot of Protestant. The Scottish are a Catholic people. There were a lot of Catholics in Scotland, but as a majority, a Calvinist country. It could be that the regiment that they're dealing with was drawn from a Catholic enclave in Scotland, but all of the religion in this film, and there is a lot of it, is Catholic religion. So Anna, the Danish soprano who is married to the German tenor, she is desperate to see her husband. So she gets permission from Crown Prince Wilhelm to entertain the army at headquarters right near the front. And this is pretty much simply a ruse to meet her husband. And he is determined to take part in this. Well, actually, he is seconded from his regiment because his commanding officer says that I don't want artists fighting for me. I want bakers, masons, carpenters, etc. And there is a very poignant reunion between the two. And it looks very good on screen because, as previously mentioned, Diane Kruger is a beautiful woman, and Benno Furman is quite a handsome man. Although, if I had been in the makeup department, I would have insisted that the male actor, has a very visible, in close-up, a very visible hole in one of his earlobes from an earring, and that makeup should have been applied to efface this or to hide it. And so Sprink is the name of the tenor. He's rather fed up already, particularly with the merrymaking at Christmas time of the officer class. That he points out that these people seem to have little in common with those in the trenches. They have ordered us there. We suffer, and they drink champagne and eat fine food. He decides to make his own little protest by singing in the trenches, and it has a marvelous effect. There's a great deal of music in this, and his music is taken up by the Scots and the priest who's serving as a stretcher bearer for the regiment. A duet begins, and Sprink is he's quite taken by this, and he grabs a small decorated Christmas tree. They brought trees to the trenches. He heads out into no man's land, singing, and he sings Stille Nacht, Silent Night. Later we hear him sing Adeste Fideles. And the French get involved as well. No one can figure out what is going on here. And so very tentatively, the soldiers get together and they decide that they are going to have a truce for Christmas. And some of them can speak the foreign languages. Some of them make do with dumb show. And alcohol is produced and shared, and chocolate, etc., etc. And the soldiers realize that there is little to differentiate themselves, particularly in the situation in which they find themselves. And it is very moving indeed to see. Of course, not all take part. And of course, William has lost his brother. His brother was shot early in an attack on a German position, and he has to move forward. He abandons his brother. We sees it as an abandonment. It's clear that he is cracked mentally by this, and he remains cracked for the rest of the film. He seems to be unsure as to whether his brother is in fact dead. He writes numerous letters to their mother as if it is the two of them writing, and he boasts to his mother that Jonathan, his brother, has become the best killer of Jerry's in the regiment, which is to have a fateful payoff later in the film. This is a very romantic film. There's not very much swearing, considering that we're dealing with soldiers at the front, and the apparition, the eruption of a woman as beautiful as Diane Kruger into their ranks. One would expect, I don't know, body comments. It's inevitable the movie of this sort is going to be compared to Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory. The penultimate scene in it, he captured a girl sings the Faithful Hussar to a group of rowdy, drunken, and sex-starved men. Of course, she shames them with her song, but there's really no suggestion in this film of just how truly extraordinary someone like Diane Kruger showing up the ranks would have been for these soldiers. The Frenchman that we see, Guillaume Canet, playing Lieutenant Camille Audebert, he is distraught because he hasn't seen his wife for months, and there were complications with her pregnancy. He doesn't know whether she's alive or dead, or whether he has a child. And he's further distressed because he's lost his wallet with the pictures of his wife, including as she is pregnant. And the German officer who is highlighted, Daniel Brühl, plays Lieutenant Horstmeyer, who is a Jew, as it turns out. This is significant because it is a celebration of Christmas, first of Christmas Eve and then of Christmas Day. And Father Palmer, the Scottish priest, he holds a mass, which of course is the Tridentine Mass, the Mass of Pope St. Pius V, which is in Latin. And this is very significant for the movie because the soldiers, they are divided by language, but in the Mass, they are united. Just as they are united in so many of the songs. Well, Adeste Fidelis, to give one example, and then later, when the priest is brought to preside over the funerals of obsequies of the dead soldiers, he reads the De Profundis, which of course is in Latin as well. This movie is a very, very powerful advocate for the universality of the Latin Mass. Of course, the word Catholic itself means universal. The next day, well, is the truce over or not? And it turns out that the soldiers actually don't want to go back to war. And so an impromptu soccer game breaks out. Meanwhile, word of this has gone to division, and the higher-ups are not best pleased by what has happened. And soon it is made clear that there will have to be punishments for this, because of this spirit of comedy among the various soldiers. If that were to prevail, it would be the end of the war. Sprink and his wife, well, they make a fateful decision that the war is over for them. And Diane Kruger talks about using her safe conduct to get to Holland. Her husband points out that's a very long way away. How about being captured by the French? And these friendships have grown up amongst these people, particularly since some of them have experiences in their other countries, or even in their neighborhoods of Montmartre in one case. And there is talk of letters being exchanged such that the news, the Frenchman can find out what happened to his wife. But this is all pretty much a smack. Will have to be meted out. The Germans are sent to Tannenberg on the Eastern Front to fight the Russians. Our French lieutenant is also transferred. There is a reveal at the near the end, which I won't spoil for you. Even the cat comes into contention, because this has been a farmhouse cat known as Nestor, but the cat became a cat, and it's renamed Felix. And later we find out that the cat has been found guilty of fraternization with the enemy. This is no joke, actually. And there is some excellent cat acting in this film. If you've ever seen Truffaut's Day for Night, you know how difficult it is to get a cat to do anything on command. But this cat acquits itself. Richardson shows up near the end as Father Palmer's bishop, and he is most displeased with the padre. He's been relieved. Palmer is being sent back to Scotland in disgrace because he seems to have forgotten that it is the duty of British soldiers, Catholic or otherwise, to kill the enemy. And Richardson gives a homily to the regiment which is replacing the regiment that was there. The Scottish regiment was there, which is also that regiment is going to be disbanded. And Richardson, as oily and sinister as only he can be, begins with quoting from the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus Christ saying that a literal sword, in this case, a military sword, that it is your duty, he tells the Catholic soldiers, to kill as many Germans as you can, because the Germans are not like us. They are not children of God and deserve to be slaughtered. And Father Palmer, well, as he moves to return to Scotland, we see him taking off the small pectoral cross he was wearing and hanging it up, rather reminiscent of Inspector Callahan throwing away his badge at the end of Dirty Harry. So, quite an ambiguous ending for this film. I found it very moving. Again, perhaps I have become more sympathetic to movies overflowing with sentiment as I have grown older. But the First World War was the greatest disaster in European history, well, so in Western history, any justification for it beginning, and even less justification for it being dragged out for 4 horrific years, which, well, it broke Europe. Europe has never recovered from that. But here's an opposite view from the film critic James Bowman. I'm familiar with Bowman's work going back decades. I read him regularly in American Spectator. I thought him rather intelligent. His reviews had insight. But Bowman is a victim of what I dubbed 9/11 syndrome, that he seemed to have gone off his head after the attacks on America on September the 11th, 2001. He begins his review in the New York Sun, a little poem by A. Hausman about the dead of World War I still has the power to make shivers run up the spine. How dead we lie because we did not choose to live and shame the land from which we sprung. Life, to be sure, is nothing much to lose, but young men think it is, and we were young. The pathos he evokes depends utterly, it seems to me, on the because clause in the first stanza. In other words, there was a reason why the young men died. Negatively, it was called shame, positively honor. The sadness of their loss is actually greater because Hausman accepts this reason without comment or criticism. The film Joyeux Noël, Christian Carrion's often moving cinematic account of the true story of the 1914 Christmas truce on the Western Front, is similar to most portrayals of this war in ignoring or disparaging the reason for it that Hausman presents so dispassionately. On this view, our sympathy with the victims of the war should be increased by the assumption that slaughter was senseless, for nothing. The filmmakers present World War I as the product of wicked or stupid leaders who somehow successfully brainwashed the people into thinking of the enemy as subhuman and deserving of merciless extermination. Whether or not this is a tenable view of the actual war's origins and history, I leave others to decide. As a matter of artistic and dramatic judgment in a film like this one, this view is a serious mistake. It forces us to suppose that those who died were fools, blind to the meaninglessness of their sacrifice. Pity for them must be mixed with contempt. No, what we are getting here is Bowman's contempt. It is perfectly capable to believe both that World War I was a fatuous, murderous mistake, but not to think that those who died in the war were fools. Because the vast majority of those people who died in the war had little knowledge or little understanding of how the war came to be prosecuted and why it continued to be prosecuted. Bowman, he loves war, and war is an honorable thing. Well, war is an honorable thing, but its causes and the reasons for any particular war need not be honorable or noble. Not at all. Lions led by donkeys, famously. It's what we heard of the British soldiers in World War I. And, well, dulce et decorum est. This is clearly Bowman's view. And, of course, many of the British who joined in 1914, 1915, 1916. You had people like H.H. Munro, the famous short story writer Saki, who was killed at the age of 40. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? I'll read from a famous poem by Wilfred Owen. If in some smothering dreams you two could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanging face like a devil sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud, of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent from some desperate glory the old lie dulce et decorum est pro patria more. That is to say, how sweet it is and noble to die for one's country. This is a movie which takes apparently the controversial stance of life over death. And if for no other reason, I would salute it for that. But I will report that I found the movie well written, well acted, well photographed. The treatment of music in it, in every sense, is exemplary, and I found it extraordinarily moving. So those are my thoughts on Joyeux Noel. I'd have to say that apart from just a few seconds in a scene of the husband and wife being reunited, if about 10, 15 seconds of this film were excised, it would be acceptable for children, for older children, certainly. But I suppose it's what is in this movie, children now frequently see in PG movies. So perhaps I'm being a little too puritanical here. Says Joyeux Noel is good. Watch it if you have the chance. A little too long, but still good. Hang on. And we're back. Frothing Fanboy says, thanks for pronouncing Adeste Fidelis correctly. Even singers often get it wrong. I listen to Pavarotti sing this just to hear his perfect pronunciation of ecclesiastical Italianate Latin. Eddie and the Cruisers is the greatest movie of all time, says Paul Caso 88. I remember when we got the cable movie channels and came in about, 1983? And that movie played over and over and over again. I must have seen this movie about 10 times. I like it. Of course, at the time, we all thought Michel Pare was going to be, the biggest star in Hollywood, but that didn't happen for some reason. Gamion says, I'm not sure what to make of KMG's taste in women. The women he likes are beautiful, but they have a special something about them, too. I think I'm trying to figure out what it is. I don't know. The thing I look for most in women is femininity, actually. In terms of actresses, what I'm looking for is a star quality or perhaps a vulnerability. I suppose Diane Kruger could be compared to Margot Robbie. I like the first and not the second because there's a very hard quality to Margot Robbie. And she is starved and efficient. A good-looking woman, no question. But again, I'm rather looking for a femininity, a vulnerability. Anne, can any movie with Michael Paré actually be great? Streets of Fire, I think, is a very underrated movie. It's completely nuts, But yeah, and it's very, very 80s. No question about that. Okay. Let's see. Glib Medley says, I watched broadcast news. Albert Brooks was good, but I was disappointed his character didn't get annihilated in the end. I don't know exactly what that means or why he should be annihilated. He's a very sympathetic character. Certainly the most sympathetic character in the movie, as far as I saw it. And we feel for him when he begs to be allowed to read the news, the network news on the weekend, and he has an attack of flop sweats. It's a very funny, but it's a very painful scene. Very painful indeed. Okay, so tomorrow, as previously mentioned, is Christmas Day. I will be on the air, nonetheless. And I am going to read in its entirety one of my favorite stories, What Men Live by Leo Tolstoy. Coming up on Theater Thursday, the third, and last in a series of movies that are related to Christmas, to the Christmas season. This is a movie by Eric Romer, one of my cinematic idols from 1969. It's called Manuishi Mod, My Night at Maud's. And I see that I've scheduled 2 art films back to back, because on January 7th, we have Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris from 1972. On January 14th, we have a film starring Bill Pullman, who I quite like. A very underrated film, little known, directed by Jake Kasdan from 1998, called Zero Effect. And on January 21st, a film from 1944 called A Canterbury Tale by the Archers, and that is Powell and Pressburger. On the book club, on January 1st, I'm going to be discussing Richard Weaver's Ideas Have Consequences. On January 8th, Hermione Lee's biography of Tom Stoppard. On January 15th, Roy Campbell's collected poetry. And on January 22nd, perhaps the best book ever written about sports, certainly the funniest, Ball 4 by Jim Bouton. So, again, I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so previously. If you would like to donate to this live stream, and donations would be especially appreciated. And I'm living in a hotel. I don't have a permanent address again, and I'm going to have to find one. So again, much, much appreciated. And I'd like to thank all of the people who have already contributed. God bless you and Merry Christmas. My PayPal account is linked to kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, donations can be sent direct via Interact to kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to form a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night and happy Christmas.